This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Selling a little or a lot? Do your thing however you cha-ching with Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/offer23.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast with the spotlight on section hikers.
And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. And I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart.
And I am Austin, and I'll be your friendly neighborhood co-host for today.
All right, you guys, as you heard, I am back this week with my co-host, Austin Wallis. And for the first time, we are going to be hosting an interview together with a guest we are both really excited to talk to. On my last episode with Austin, I left off with a little teaser that we would be back to chat about Austin's favorite tent. A few weeks ago, Austin reached out to me with an idea to contact the designer of the tent to see if he would come on the podcast with us. And well, he said yes. So here's Austin to give you a little taste about our guest directly from his gear website.
Our guest has been a hiker and an adventurer for nearly 20 years. He's amassed hundreds of nights in the outdoors and written thousands of technical gear posts in ultralight online communities like backpackinglight.com and Reddit. Never content with the status quo, though, he's been building his own gear for over a decade, including building a tent with dynamic composite fabric, or DCF for short, way back in 2009, before most other companies working with DCF even existed. Our guest is continually pushing the limits of outdoor adventure. His travels include hiking the 2,600-mile Pacific Crest Trail and the first yo-yo hike of Canada's Great Divide Trail, along with his wife. He has also held the fastest known time on the 92-kilometer Stein Valley Traverse up in British Columbia, and is the 5-time fastest finisher in the Bob Marshall Wilderness Open, which is an approximately 100-mile off-season traverse of the Montana Rockies. So as a side note, if you haven't heard of any of these treks, swing over to your favorite search engine and check them out. Because I hadn't heard of some of this stuff, so that's what I did, and holy smokes, I have even more respect for our guy today. This guy has got some serious street cred. He's worked as a gear tester and an ambassador for small gear brands, reviewed gear for backpackinglight.com, and established remote off-trail hiking and scrambling routes. Our guest combines his comprehensive technical knowledge with extensive field experience to design the highest performance ultralight equipment. His designs achieve this through extensive thought about how to solve real-world problems using a first principles design philosophy. With the core design developed, he then works with several of the world's top outdoor gear factories to produce the gear at the highest build quality.
All right, you guys. Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. And if this is your first time to the podcast, thanks for joining us. And a big welcome back to my co-host, Austin Wallis, and our guest today, the creator of the X-Mid 1-person, X-Mid 2-person, the DD40 Backpack, and the X-Mid Pro, Mr. Dan Durston. All right, you guys, welcome back to the podcast. And first and foremost, welcome back, co-host Austin.
Great to be here.
Really glad to see you again. Yeah. And you guys, for the first time to the show, please welcome with me, Mr. Dan Durston.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you joining us, Dan. Your life has been rather busy recently.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So we will get into that. Just so you guys know, in the introduction, Dan, we gave everybody like a full background on the thousands of miles that you've hiked, your yo-yo of the Great Divide Trail, your FKT, your Bob Marshall Wilderness Open Trek that you have done several times, and have kind of led them to some awesome tents that you've made and your backpack. So before we get to the present day madness, so full disclosure, we are recording this on January 12th. And if you are a Durston Gearhead, you'll know why is the 12th is a crazy date. We figured we could kind of go back with you a little bit and kind of have you lead us into how in the world you decided to design your own tent. And then we'll kind of get into present day. Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
All right. So this X-Mid tent thing, what's that about? And how'd you get that started?
Yeah, the roots of it are like go pretty deep. I've always been a gear geek. Like once I got into ultralight stuff, 2008, 2009, I was already like sewing my own stuff and cutting tags, all that kind of stuff. I've always just naturally enjoyed the geeking out. Is kind of a way of taking like the camping experience kind of home and living vicariously through it. Like when you're not out hiking, you can kind of be kind of prepping for it. So I was always a gear geek. And then when I did the Pacific Crest Trail in 2014, you have a lot of time to think. You're just walking all day. And when some people are listening to podcasts, people are doing like music. I didn't have any headphones or anything. So when I'm just hiking all day and it's like kind of straightforward trail, I'm just thinking about gear, which sounds kind of lame. Like I feel like I should be like appreciating the birds and the bees. And I do that too, but I think about gear a lot. And so I was always thinking about like trekking pole shelters because I was using them. And I was just like, there's so many good things, but they're just like complicated. And the only ones that I liked that weren't complicated were these pyramids where they're like 4 stakes and a pole. But then this pole is like the only high part has a pole there, and you can't sit in the only spot that would be high enough. And it's kind of in the door, and it's got all these things. So when I was hiking the PCT, I was always thinking about like, how can we fix that? But I didn't really have the first principles philosophy back then. So I was always just thinking about like, what could we do to a pyramid? Like add like extra struts and hoops and like guy lines and like anything I could think of was like, yeah, it creates more problems than it like really solves. So I thought about it for like months on the PCT and didn't really have an idea. And then life came back, and it was 2017 when I was on the yo-yo, the Great Divide Trail, that again, you have these long days and you start thinking, or I start thinking gear the whole time. And finally, I really got into this first principles mindset where I was like, the only thing that's going to make sense here is like, I have 2 hiking poles. Why am I only using one of them? Like anything I might want to do, like struts and poles, is kind of like compensating for like when I could probably just use the pole. And so eventually I was like, okay, it's got to be a rectangle and it's got to use 2 hiking poles, and they can't be around the edge because then you need guy lines. So as soon as I was like 2 poles kind of near the middle, and I was like, well, how am I going to sleep in there? Then as soon as I had that philosophy, it was like the solution was obvious, because the only way you can sleep in there and have 2 poles in there is if they're on one angle and you're on the other. It just crosses like the X. And I was like hiking, and I was like, oh, like that might work. But you're like, I was like 200 kilometers in the bush at the time. So it's just like an idea in your head. And you're like, it sounds good, but
I gotta write that down.
Yeah. Until you like build it, you don't really know. Like, what's it going to feel like? So I had thought of this, and I was just thinking, maybe if I get around to it, I'll make one. And then it was just kind of really a crazy coincidence how it all started, because I had just got some free hiking poles for that trip from Mass Drop at the time. And they were just kind of handing them out to everybody just to get more reviews online. And after the trip, I was just like, hey, posted the review. And they were like, oh, cool. Like, we're looking to like make gear. And they were like, if you ever have an idea for gear, like they were like, maybe like a pot. And I was like, a pot? Like, it's kind of boring. But I was like, I have this idea for a tent. And like, so I was never going to start a gear company. Like, I'm a gear geek, but I don't really want to like take on a whole company. I just want like one for me. So they were like, yeah, we could like make this tent. And I was like, well, if I can get one and I don't have to sew it because I'm slow. So it's gonna take me probably easier just to design the thing properly than to like have me struggle in my basement for a month. They were just like receptive to it and they wanted to do it. And they had like factories. They had a guy there at the time who was an awesome ultralight hiker, and he like knew all the materials and everything. And so I just kind of like did like the design, and they like figured out how you're going to like all the stuff I don't know anything about. So essentially we worked together. I basically like licensed the idea to them, and they took all the financial risk, and I just like made the actual tent, which was nice because there was no like scary like finances.
So pretty much you had like an ideal deal when it came to, you designing and, licensing it to them. That sounds like a hiker's dream.
Totally. Like, how many people get like the opportunity to like have someone take a chance on them like that? Because I had no history of like design. I mean, I'm sewing like my own rain pants. I'm not like, I don't have like a track record of like awesome stuff. I'm just like a geek. But like, so they really took a chance on me, and like just the odds of like I did have a good idea, and then they took a chance on me.
So listen, I am now a geek, like a tent geek. I have totally geeked out on this. I'm going to blame Austin. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Austin because I'll tell you, I am an educator by day, but I am now a student of Dan Durston because I have just been I've been listening to other podcasts. I've been, reading forums. I mean, I have really done a deep dive, but I am very, very new to your 4 core philosophies and your design. And I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, man, this is like a college case study. This is like something I could really dive into and, try to decipher, why he did this and what he was thinking. And I think Austin and I came to the conclusion it was like people sitting around a campfire, but you actually did it. People sitting around a campfire talking about this stuff, like why I don't like this tent, why I don't like this backpack. So Austin, what made you kind of lead it, get one of Dan's tents? And I'm going to turn it over to you because you know way more about this than I do. And we've got Dan here. So,
well, the whole impetus for on my end was the John Muir Trail, and knowing that I was going to hike it. I've been a hammock camper, and I was like, well, I need a tent if I'm going to be hiking the JMT. And so, I hiked with a couple of guys that had the duplexes, and I just, at the time, we'll get into this, but at the time I wasn't ready to drop $600 on a DCF tent. And so I started looking at other options, and I honestly don't remember how I found the XMID the first time. I think it might've been on Reddit or something like that. And it was still relatively new. And so there wasn't a lot out there that I could find, but it seemed to check all the blocks. And the thing that sold me was just the simplicity, the simplicity of the setup. If you only have 4 stakes and 2 trekking poles, you're good. And there was not as much fiddling, and it just goes up and you're ready to go. And the fly first pitch was something that I liked as well. For those that don't know the fly first, essentially when you set up the tent, the rain fly is going to always be the first thing that goes up. And so if you're setting up in the rain, you can potentially keep the inside of the tent dry. So that's what sold me. But I'm curious, talked about the first principles approach and how you came up with the fundamental design. But the fabric choice was something that I thought was interesting too. So it's polyester, which is not something you see in tents a lot. So I'm just curious how you ended up with that choice.
Yeah, polyester is, it's great. I've always been a geek on materials, and I was like seeing like the nylons and the polyesters coming out. And when we just came out with the XMID, they were just like, what fabric do you want? And we'll go find it. And I was just refreshing kind of on materials. But it just seemed to me like a lot of what I was reading about polyester as negatives wasn't necessarily true. A lot of it was like, oh, it's not nearly as strong. When actually a lot of that is like the coatings, like the polyurethane or the like a sil nylon might be a lot stronger than a polyurethane poly, but mostly because of the polyurethane and not the poly.
That's
a lot of polys in one sentence.
Again, I'm over here being a student. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much to learn.
Yeah, so like the coatings matter more than the fiber, but everyone's like upset. It's almost like this rivalry between like nylon and polyester when they're within like for sure 20%. And nylon definitely loses 10% strength when it's wet. And you could easily argue they're more like within 10. So it's like pretty much a wash. And then polyester is UV resistant. So over time, it doesn't weaken like nylon. So it's like maybe nylon is a little bit stronger when it's new and dry. But as soon as it's like wet or used, there's no win there. Whereas the huge win with polyester is that it doesn't expand. And underwater, nylon will absorb water, which is like bad for like all sorts of reasons. It's like it's heavy, it's slow to dry, but it actually expands the chemical bonds, and that makes it weaker because everything's further apart. That is a huge problem for a trekking pole shelter because on a regular tent, if it expands, the fly just kind of looks sloppy, but it's not like structurally unsound. Whereas on a trekking pole tent, like the fabric joins the structural elements, and if it's loose, your whole tent's just like legitimately unstable. So it seemed like, at least for a trekking pole tent, like polyester made like more sense. And at the time, I was just kind of looking at it very factually, like, okay, here's all like the pros and the cons, and like this makes sense. And then I ended up just kind of like choosing poly because it made sense at a time when poly was just kind of like hitting the mainstream. And then the X-Mid kind of blew up, and it kind of knew. I kind of became this like not promoter, but like ambassador for polyester in the sense that like.
Well, as Austin would say, it seems like it checks all the boxes. You know, especially for me, as I was reading some information. At this point, I've read so much, Dan, I don't even know where I got the information from, but I know it's come from you. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the durability of polyester against elements, specifically rain, and how it's more, repellent, and how you stay more dry. And that was the main reason that you chose that, because of where you were hiking specifically.
Yeah, I like my backyard's the west coast of BC, and so like it's wet a lot. A lot of things that just seem normal to me, like it raining all the time, are like not the case in like California and other areas. So it's kind of blown away on the like in the Pacific Crest Trail when it's like, oh, it actually like you can get away with like not being as prepared because it's just going to rain for an hour and it's warm or whatever. But for like the tents, my background is like you got to be prepared for this stuff. So like it definitely has to be waterproof. It definitely like should be seam taped or like sealed. I like double wall tents. Like your doors shouldn't let rain fall right inside, and it should pitch fly first. So it's not, you're losing before you're even starting if like the tent's getting wet and you haven't even got in the thing yet.
And I love how the rain fly goes all the way to the ground.
Yeah, that's like another thing where it's like it's got to, because like I don't want rain splattering and under my tent. And so I've actually like I want it to actually work. It's not just like for conditions where you hardly need a tent. Sure, you could make it lighter if you don't really need a tent in the first place.
Well, listen, staying dry is key. And I think we're at a good point now where we can we've given people some really good information about who you are and, what you've done and why you've done it. And I'm going to let Austin geek out because I know he has questions about present day designs and where we are now. Yeah. So I think it's a good point to turn it toward that. And like I said, it's January the 12th. So we're leading up to that. So Austin, geek away.
Yeah. So I guess I can't even imagine what your inbox looks like. I mean, just with all the nonsense just selling anything on the internet has got to be a pain. But when you're selling something in such high demand, I'm sure it's just, if you had an internet phone, it'd be ringing off the hook, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about, obviously the X-Mid's kind of just this revolutionary thing. And I'm curious about your process, because for those that don't know, Dan has recently re-released the 1-person and the 2-person versions of his tent. And so, but there's some improvements or updates. So I'm curious how you came about, with those changes or how those things that needed to be changed, how that was identified.
Yeah, so there's a few like components there. One thing that's really been helpful to like me, because I'm a gear geek, but I'm still learning. Like I don't like come into this with like 40 years of experience. I think of it more like I come into it as a user where I know how things should work. I want like it to be easy and all these kind of things. And I don't necessarily know like how to get there, but I know what I need to get to. And so we've had so much community engagement on like Reddit and our fan club and on the Drop website, and just like tens of thousands of people like commenting, and there's so much you can learn from that. And so like some of the changes are like things that I've like learned and identified, and other things are just like user suggestions where I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Like for example, on the first generation, it kind of sloped in a bit at the shoulders and it was a bit narrow, but people were like, hey, like, why don't you just like clip it out to the fly right there? And I was like, yeah, we should. And so you could actually do it then, thankfully. Like it was a good idea, and the door toggles would hook onto each other. So people could do it then, but it was like we could like actually like make that like properly designed for that. And it's a very simple change, and there's like a nice boost in shoulder room. So I'm the combination of like me always obsessing over it and people just like sharing with us constantly gives us like all sorts of like new ideas to just make it better.
Nice.
I love that. I love that you actually take customer feedback, because a lot of companies will take the feedback and you never really know if that was actually initiated into the product. So I love that.
Yeah, like people that email us, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but like we email everybody
No,
back.
you do. I've seen
and
it.
Like, I mean, it's time consuming, but like people email us. Sometimes it's hard because there's also just like too many suggestions. There's just like, I want it in red, I want it in pink, I want it in blue. It's like,
don't go from Sage. Sage is it now.
Yeah. So you have to still like have discretion, but there's so much stuff that I'm always learning to make things better. And then I always want to make it better, partly because I'm just like geeking out on it. And also just like, if somebody was like trying to like copy our tent someday, I would like, well, I never understood companies that like come out with a tent and then don't change it for like 5 years, because like, there's no way you're not learning more. Like there's feedback, there's always things, there's better materials. I think pretty much every single batch of our tent has had at least one change. And this is a bigger one now, but we're like, that's like something I want to be doing, is like always just like trying to make it better. So it's not like a stagnant product. So that's what the next gen 1P is like the 2P came out like a year after. So it was kind of leapfrog the 1P. And then now the 1P is kind of leapfrogging the 2P, although we're kind of trying to still do most of the same stuff. So they're still pretty similar.
That's something that always stuck out for me. And kind of the reason this podcast is even happening is because what struck me about you personally was the fact that you reached out to, you responded to comments, you commented on my YouTube video about the XMed. And you seem very open and approachable and transparent, and you're willing to talk about things that other companies, other designers just aren't. So I think that's very unique for your company. So that was one of the things that drew me out. But if we're good with the 1 and the 2P, I want to talk about the Pro.
I've been waiting on that to come. So here we go. Dan, get ready.
because I and when I first got the XMed, my $300 was my price point, and I was, because like I said, I'm a hammock camper. And I was like, I'm not really ready to drop, $600 plus on a tent if I'm going to be, hammock camping. But I have drunk the Kool-Aid. So I'm very excited about the Pro, and I know it as of this recording, it hasn't, the specs haven't been released or anything, so I'm not going to ask about that. But I'm curious, because I know you've talked about making a DCF XMed for a while. Was that something that you wanted to do, or like you said, the group think, the crowd suggestions and that kind of thing, was that where it came from?
I have always definitely wanted to do a DCF tent because it's like the cutting edge material for ultralight. Yeah. And you're just getting like the most function for your weight, maybe not for your dollar, because it is a lot more expensive, but you're getting like the most, like once you've paid for it and gotten past that sting, you do have like a real functional benefit in that it's a lot lighter. So I always wanted to do one, but it was scary to do like up front because it's like a smaller niche. It's like a more premium product. And so the regular versions were always designed to be like the well-rounded one that's going to make sense for everybody. It's like good at everything. Not just like light purely for the sake of being light, but like light while being like just a really functional tent, like a full coverage fly and vents and everything like that. So it's just like, it makes sense for everybody. And then the Pro is like, here's a tent for like the geeks who like, who don't mind like paying some more money and like making do with some trade-offs. Cause you can't just like, sometimes there are trade-offs.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that too.
So the main one is that it's a single wall tent. So the floor is still bug proof. The floor is like sewn right into the fly. There's mesh walls between the vestibules, but just overhead, it's just the fly. And that's going to work well in most conditions, but it's not going to work as well in like the wettest conditions, because either way you can get condensation, but the double wall keeps you from touching it essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done like everything we can to make that as good as possible. Like for example, it has peak vents, and any other tent is in this weight class, doesn't have those. So the Pro is going to weigh 20 ounces compared to 36. So it's like almost half. So it's 1.25 pounds. And it's like, it's not just that it's like super light, but it's like still really good. It's like, it's got peak vents. It's like still spacious. It's still simple. The fly still goes to the ground. It still like protects your doorways. Other than like the single wall thing and the cost, it's like everything is pretty much there, and there's like an entire pound off the tent.
That's awesome. Now, how did you approach designing this? Because I know you've got a pretty different way of going about things, which I think is pretty interesting. But we talked about this first principles design. Did you try to turn the original two-person into a DCF, or did you just approach it like from the ground up and start over from scratch?
Yeah. So maybe I'm like a sucker for punishment, but I like kind of starting ground up on like everything. So like, obviously it was going to be an X-mid. So like the basic concept of the geometry was there. And that like concept was solving the question of just like, what's the best shape? It's my answer to the question of like, what's the best shape or floor plan for a trekking pole tent?
Yeah.
And then with the Pro was a bit different question, because we were going to use that general concept, but now we're going to say the core question is like, how can we like make it as light as possible? And so like a good example is like everything is completely different. It'll look the same, but like everything is completely reworked with that like slightly different focus of like, instead of like optimally well-rounded, it's like for the weight geeks. So for example, like on the regular tents, they pitch with the pole tip up, but you need like a grommet there. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you have, and we have that and it works fine and it's great, but the grommet weighs 3 grams. Whereas with a single wall tent, there's already a mesh wall sewn there. And so you can it'll kind of hold the pole. And so we could flip the pole upside down and put the handle up, and we just had to like tweak the pocket shape. And the win is you save 3 grams. And it was actually hard to get right, because the pole's got to sit properly and it wants to move. But we ditched the grommet and we like gooped around forever on how it connects at the peak to hold the pole properly, just to save 3 grams.
I'm telling you, there's people out there that are like salivating right now, because that's what they want. I mean, that is what they want. The wallets are open.
Yeah. So like we did the first one like that with the handle up, and it wouldn't sit right. And I was like, what have I done? Like, I just messed this thing up for 3 grams. But eventually we got it working. And then now it's like, because we went back to square one, and like fundamentally you can do it lighter if the handle's up. So like now we're fundamentally on the right track. We're not like trying to make the wrong track work. We're like on the most efficient track. And that's the same for everything, like the vents and like everything. It's just like right from the basic, what makes the most sense, and then let's get that to work.
Nice. Yeah. The other thing that stuck out was one of the things you leaked out. It was probably a couple of weeks ago at this point, but talking about the seams and how you're doing a hot bonded seam. How did you end up with that?
This has got to be the really geeky stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like DCF's like basically like a glorified reinforced plastic, and you can sew it, but it's not great. And you can use like essentially a double-sided tape, and you just like stick it together, and that works fine. But it's not very temperature stable, in the sense that if it's really hot, it can start to like slip, and if it's really cold, I don't think there's ever a single reported failure, but in like deep cold winter conditions, it actually is like 80% weaker. And theoretically it could break in like a winter snowstorm, which would be exactly when you don't want it to break. I've like geeked out on all the possible ways you could assemble DCF and talk to like DSM who make it. And like, there's really one way that's just like obviously the best way. And it's still essentially like a tape, a double-sided tape, but they actually heat press it. They like put some tape and then they heat press it, and it's more heat activated and it's drastically more temperature stable on both the hot and the cold end. And it also kind of seals it so we don't have like frayed thread kind of fibers sticking out. So it's one of those things that maybe it's a little overkill, but it sure looks sweet, and it's the best.
Well, now, so I listened to one of your other podcasts that you talked about like durability and it's tents that say they don't make any compromises. That's impossible. It's impossible to not make a compromise. And so I'm curious, do you see the Pro as obviously with the weight loss, there's a compromise there. Do you feel like it's just less durable, or, what's the compromise that somebody that's buying the Pro would have to make?
Yeah, I think the single largest compromise, so that you're kind of compromising on everything, which
but
sounds
you're saving
bad.
weight. That's that's the prize.
Yeah. So like everything exists on a spectrum from like the lightest option to the most like functional, durable option. And you're going to choose somewhere on that spectrum. So with everything, when you go lighter, you're giving up something. So there's all sorts of little ones. The biggest one is the single wall. It's not going to protect you from contacting condensation. So you have to just be a bit thoughtful. And it's maybe not the right tool for the job if you're like in the Amazon. Whereas the regular tents would protect you from that. That's the main one. And then other ones are like everything's a little bit less durable. So like the zippers are like number 3s instead of number 5s. The floor is like a 15D instead of a 20. So everything's just like not going like stupid or crazy, because it's still like there's some crazy tents that are more like, I mean, they're super light, but they like, you get past the realm of like actually also being a good tent.
Something that's not going to hold up in a rainstorm is going to disintegrate.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like tents that use like the 0.3 ounce DCF is just like, so the problem with it is that of the weight of DCF, 0.25 is the outer plastic. And then the rest is the reinforcing fibers. So if you go 0.3, you've only got like 0.05 of Dyneema. You go to 0.5, you got 5 times as much for just like a little more.
Okay,
weight.
so for those of us that can't quite totally understand and geek out, so I'm thinking about this, the DCF is only going to last a certain parameter, whereas the polyester, the tried and true, is, the DCF, after you go for a through hike, it's probably going to be done. Am I getting this right? And then your polyester is going to last for more than what I would call a season of hiking.
Yeah, that's like the gist of it for sure. So like polyester kind of lasts forever because it's UV resistant. Like there's nothing about it that really degrades over time. So if you don't like break it or damage it, it just lasts forever. Dyneema is even stronger, so you would be actually harder to break it, but it does slowly wear out just from packing the tent and from crumpling, and over time, over like 200-300 nights, it starts to age. People do get 500 nights on them, so it still has a good lifespan, but like it's for sure that it's not going to last like kind of indefinitely like polyester can.
Here's a random question that just popped into my head. So what's your preferred method for storing a DCF tent then?
Everybody says you should roll them. I've always been a roller because I'm just like kind of that organized kind of guy. Like the thought of stuffing a tent is like counter to my personality.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
So I've always been... We haven't done like a lot of our own research on stuffing, but all the other Dyneema companies say you should roll them. And okay. I think they're probably right.
So there's the answer on that. Roll it up, people.
Gotcha. So switching gears then, it seems like I just got lucky when I bought mine at the end of 2020. But it's like the supply chain just vanished for the X-Men. Now, is that because of just all things COVID, or can you speak to kind of this Because once the internet discovered the X-Mid, they were just whoosh gone. He couldn't get one anywhere. So I'm just curious, has that been, or just curious of your perspective on that?
Yeah, so we are X-Mid production like now is similar to what it was in like the last 2 years. It's actually about the same. It's just that demand is like crazy. So we would sell like, it's always changed so much, but we'd get tents and they would take a few months to sell out and we'd pretty much have the next ones back in like 2019, 2020. And now we just like, we're not remotely close.
Do you ever see Durston Gear meeting that demand? Or is it always, do you feel like it's always going to kind of be like this?
We are going to meet it. We have like the worst possible situation under COVID. So like everybody has COVID situations with supply chains. But then the two other extra things that we have are that right when COVID was hitting was when Drop decided they wanted to get out of the outdoors market, which was the company I had licensed it to.
Gotcha.
So they were like, I was like, we need to order a lot more because everybody wants these. And they're like, well, we don't know. So like, we're just going to order the same as last year.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, no, you need way more.
I mean, did they not look at the data?
They just were way more into like some of their other markets.
Gotcha.
So then the factory is emailing and they're like, hey, like lead times are crazy. You guys got to order. And Drop's like, I don't know. So that like them moving out of it led to a thing.
Gotcha.
And then that has since been fixed because Drop decided there's like a year where they were kind of in limbo. And then finally they just relicensed it to somebody else now who like is super interested and they are ordering way more. But for a year, it was kind of like they just weren't responding while COVID was happening. And then the third thing is that just like, cause we're like a brand new company, we don't have any like sway like the big ones do. So it's not like anybody like is going to like our tents are produced at like the same factory as kind of like Mountain Hardware or something, but like they're never going to go to Mountain Hardware and be like, sorry, like we cut all your production because
right.
like we got to make X-Mids.
I don't know. Maybe if you come back on it a couple years from now, we might be actually having a different conversation.
Yeah, maybe we'll get there. But so for right now, we had all those things and we've kind of fixed it. It's just that the lead times are like 2 years. So we like the tents that went on sale on Monday and sold out in like 3 minutes. We ordered those in 2020.
Wow.
So it's like, there's just such a hangover. And so we finally get good tents at the end of this year, at like the end of 2022. And then like next year for sure, we'll have like 10 times as many tents and that should roughly meet demand.
I never do that. So
that's crazy.
That kind of leads into, so you're kind of done with Drop, it sounds like, and you've started using another company. And then I heard you say before that Durston Gear was maybe, you didn't really anticipate that happening, but you have DurstonGear.com that people can go to and read all this awesome information and see the tents. You can't necessarily buy the tents, but everybody can see them. And you have very update information of when things will be available and what's happening. So where do you see Durston Gear going in the future? Yeah, so I'm still trying to figure that out, but so there's this new company, Caviso, and they took over for Drop, and they're great because they actually are interested in the products and they're investing, and like, other than this huge hangover, like they're going to do a good job with the regular tents. And that's great for me because like, I don't even have the money to I can't buy like 10,000 tents. So that's nice having that. And then what I'm doing at the same time is I'm also looking at developing some of my own stuff that I can take on that is more like within my capacity. So the X-Mid Pro is the first tent. And when things kind of wrapped up with Drop, they kind of said like, yeah, I can do like new stuff like without them, and like kind of rejig the contract. So I can do stuff besides these like ones that are with Caviso. And so we're doing the X-Mid Pro. That is going to be on DurstonGear.com. And that one's like scary for me because that's like mortgage the house and buy DCF. So it's like,
well, I've already got so I kind of when Jester was talking about how she like did a pre-order on Caviso to make sure she could get her X-Mid, I totally did the same thing and went on Durston Gear and bought the Storm Wire or whatever, the Iron Wire. and just to do a trial run to make sure I could, like, how many clicks I needed to do. So whenever the Pro comes out, I'll be one of those geeks sitting there hitting refresh. So
Yeah, sweet. Yeah. So like it comes out on the 24th, so probably like before this podcast. So
yeah,
people that are listening can see if we're sold out or if we're if we got
or
them
they
on
can
blowout.
see. Well, along those lines, so this is actually going to come out the second week of February as people are listening to this. What can you give? Is there a spring launch coming out, or are you going to be able to sell in the spring or late summer? Is there a timeline?
We do have tents like all year. They're just like not nearly enough, which makes it frustrating for people. And we don't want that. But like we have more tents coming in May, more tents in July, and then a bunch in like September, October. Those are all the regular tents. And then the pros, we have this big batch coming sometime in the summer that I have no idea how fast it's going to sell out. So it could be available all summer. It could be gone in like 3 days.
I'm going to make the prediction just on the hype alone that they're going to go quick.
Well, the X-Vids, what was it, 3 minutes?
Yeah, it was quick.
So January 10th, 3 minutes at 10 a.m. It took 10:03 gone.
Yeah.
How many tents were in that order? That 3 minutes?
There was over 1,000.
Over 1,000. Wow.
Yeah, and then we'll have. I think our batch that's tomorrow will be over 2,000, and there'll be like several times that many people like trying to get one.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so listen, you were on Facebook and you were doing these percentages, and again, I'm an educator, but I cannot figure these things out. You were saying that 35% of the people that got them today, that 65% of the people will be able to get them on Thursday. And all I said was, thank God I got one, because I can't figure out these percentages. So it's been fun joining the Facebook group, the Durston Gearheads. And I'm going to go ahead and show this to you guys. So I bought something too off of the Durston website, and I have my coveted Durston sticker. Austin, don't be jealous. But
I've got one coming. I bought that.
You've got one coming. And it's amazing the conversations on the Facebook group about the stickers, about the tents. And it's a community that I've never seen anything like it before when it comes to gear, because for the most part, everybody's so nice and you are very interactive in that Facebook group. So if you don't mind, talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's been amazing. Like I don't really know like how you start a gear company. Like if you look at other gear companies, they're like advertising and they're getting on magazines, and like I just do what comes naturally to me, which is like engage online, which I was doing before I was always in the forums and in the Facebook groups. And so it's extra fun to talk about like stuff that I'm working on, because like my head's engaged in it. And it's just been huge for us because people have good ideas, and then people are excited and they share. Like all our momentum is driven by like passionate people. There's no advertising. I mean, I'm like on the forums, like talking about stuff, but I'm not like paying and promoting posts and everything like that. So for like the gearheads to just like spread the word and recommend the tent and comment on YouTube videos, and like, that's like been kind of why it's as popular as it is. So we really like owe a lot of our success to them.
I mean, the word of mouth is truly phenomenal. So, and I mean, the reason I know is because of Austin. So, I mean, to me, it's been a great, initially it was a rabbit hole, but man, I'm in. I have my sticker.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, I just think the Facebook group is like, it's, Facebook groups can be a weird just cesspool sometimes, but the Gearhead Facebook group is just like Jester was saying, like everybody's nice. and I don't know if you ever got one of the t-shirts that people were making.
Right.
But yeah. There's definitely, like you said, some passion in the group for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Some people take it pretty far, but it's
not a cult. They want everybody to know it's not a cult.
It's not a cult. Yeah, I have here in my notes, hashtag not a cult. I don't know. I'm questioning at this point.
That's right on the edge.
So Dan, I mean, quite honestly, I am very grateful and thankful that you answered my email and agreed to join Austin and I on the podcast. I mean, phenomenal what you've done. You've built a community that follows you and believes in you, because the tent and your backpack, you also have a backpack, the DD40, are built on science. And it's and you're a scientist, and we didn't even talk about that. Are you still, you're still working as a scientist, right?
Yeah, I still have a full-time day job. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. So as we conclude this episode, I just want to say thank you again. And are there any thoughts or shout outs? And Austin has told me that everybody that has purchased something from Dan Durston, whether it's a tent, a backpack, even your bear hanging rope that I got, give everybody a shout out. Is there something you want to say to your fans?
Yeah, I'd like a huge thank you to there's this guy John Sweet. He started the Facebook group, and he was kind of like #1 fan from day one. I always like kind of doubt myself. So like when he's like, we're gonna start a Facebook group, I'm like, oh, there's gonna be like 5 people on there. And he was just instrumental in like getting that community going, and that's been like amazing for us. So like a big thank you to John, and then to everyone in these communities. Like that's our success, is the community on like the Facebook group and on Reddit, and the people that share ideas and tell their friends, and like we owe everything to them. So a huge thank you to the community and the grassroots that has made this all happen. It's been fun.
Awesome. Any parting words, Austin?
I'm just thank you, Dan, for taking some time with us. I know your life has got to be really crazy right now, but just thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And listen, as we sign off here, one last thing I did not want to forget. Dan, you are getting ready to have a baby, so congratulations.
Yeah, I just needed something busier to.
Right, need something else to complicate your life, right?
Yeah, I'll probably be a week out when this podcast is posted.
Wow.
So.
And thanks to your wife too, because I know she helps you, and I see her commenting on Facebook as well. So again, thanks, Austin. Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. And Austin and I will be back to close out the episode.
Great.
All right, Austin. I mean, unbelievable. We just interviewed Dan Durston.
This is for all you gearheads out there. We made it. We did it.
We made it. We did it. That was incredible. And if I have one parting thought, just wow, really. I mean, Dan has, done the ultimate thing. A lot of us have sat around a campfire before. We talk about our gear and we compare our gear, and we hike and we think about gear. But Dan has done something different. He went home and made the gear, and now he's selling the gear. Yeah.
How many of us have created something after, he was talking about, he had a lot of time to think on his PCT through hike, which I can definitely identify with, lots of time to think. But how many of us come back and actually follow through on that or create something, So I think that was awesome, just to hear his perspective on that. And I love the fact that he's just a regular guy. Like, he's so transparent with how he came up with this and the processes and everything that went on behind the scenes. Because a lot of the people on the internet, all they see is a tent that they want, and they can't get it because it's sold out. Oh, it's sold out. But there's a story, and there's people's lives and everything behind the scenes. And it gave me a really great appreciation for all of the just countless hours that he and his crew must go through to make all of that happen.
And honestly, he solved all my problems. So I'm going to close out the episode and say this. I have publicly said I will never buy a trekking pole tent, and I have publicly said the reasons why. I never wanted a pole right, in front of my face when I'm trying to get out of the tent. And because of Dan's follow through, I now own a one-person X-Mid. Well, I don't have it in my hands yet, but I will here in a few weeks. And I'm just incredibly thankful for his follow through and being willing to come on the show.
Absolutely. Good times.
So yeah, there you go. Good times. And you guys know the drill. As always, you could go to the hikingradionetwork.com and click on the Jester Section Hiker Show to find all of today's show notes, pictures, and links mentioned in this episode. If you find value in what we do here at the network and want to give back to help in the production of our shows, you could always leave a donation by clicking on any one of the donate buttons found on our website. And be sure to leave us a note on why you enjoy our shows. Thanks for listening. Be safe out there and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets in these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Hello, Saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.